Welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators webinar series. We're really excited to do this joint webinar with the Nonprofit Roundtable. We'll get started in just a minute. So welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about IT planning and budgeting. Next slide. Just a few tips before we get started. We encourage you all to ask questions. You can post them via chat. Also, we'll be sharing a few polls with you during the webinar, so if you can please respond to those, that would be great. If possible, avoid multitasking, and we will be sharing the webinar PowerPoint and the recording with you afterwards. Just a little bit about Community IT. We work with nonprofits in the DC metro area. We help them address both their strategic and day-to-day IT challenges. Now we're going to hand it over to Nonprofit Roundtable so they can talk a little bit about what they focus on.
Can you hear me now, Roshni?
Yes,
okay.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Just in case, I'll start again from where I began. But again, my name is Malcolm Fergal. I'm the Membership and Information Manager of the Nonprofit Roundtable of Washington. We're very excited to partner with Community IT Innovators on this webinar today. We appreciate the hard work of Roshni in helping to set this up, so thank you, Roshni. We're very excited to hear from Johan, the COO of Community IT Innovators, and very happy to have Norwin on the line with us from Clinica del Pueblo, one of our longtime members at the Nonprofit Roundtable. As you see on this slide, there's some brief information about us. Oh, I guess the slide changed again. One of the things that I wanted to mention quickly for those of you who are not familiar with us is that we are an alliance of over 300 leaders, as you see on the screen here. This is our almost been around for 12 years now, and we operate throughout the greater Washington region in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, working especially with direct service or nonprofit organizations, as well as community and government leaders who are interested in supporting the efforts of nonprofits in the region. We do this in many different ways, and I'm happy to talk about that offline. My email address is on the screen. I think we're going to send some more information about what we do after this webinar. But two things I want to mention real quick that are coming up that might be of interest to those on the call today is our Technology for Nonprofits discussion group. It meets every other month. In fact, the last meeting we had Johan join us and talk about a separate issue regarding bring your own device policies for organizations. The next meeting for the group is on November 20th. And I believe it's going to be focusing on Google Apps for nonprofits. So if you're interested in that topic, it's going to be Wednesday, November 20th, 9 and 10:30 a.m. And there's information at nonprofitroundtable.org. And one other opportunity that's coming up in the future is early next year, March 12th actually. We're having a big event all about nonprofit communications, how to leverage communications towards accomplishing your mission of your organization. So I've already talked too much, but I just wanted to share those things real quick. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them by email or phone. And thank you so much for the time, Roshni, and I'm excited to hear from Johan and Norwin. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Whoops. All right, thank you very much, Malcolm. Definitely appreciate the introduction, and we're very much looking forward to this webinar today. So So let me start with a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll ask Norwin to introduce himself. As Malcolm mentioned, my name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Community IT Innovators. Norwin, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, Norwin Herrera from the Clinica del Pueblo. Since I've been working in the Clinica since May last year.
Great. So the format for our webinar today is I'm going to talk a little bit sort of at a broad level about IT planning and budgeting, and then Norwin's going to share some of his experiences at the Clinica and also share some of the approaches that he's taken to planning and budgeting that have helped him. Before we do that, we wanted to take a quick poll. So if you could look at your GoToWebinar software there, the little poll question should come up. We're just curious who's in attendance today based on staff size. So just answer how many staff are in your organization, whether it's 1 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, or more than 100. Yeah, and actually here we go, poll's coming. So if you could just take a minute to answer that. All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for answering. About 50% of our audience is in the 1 to 20 range, about 15% in the 20 to 50, about a quarter in the 50 to 100 range, and another 15% in the over 100 range. Just under 15%. So we have a nice sort of diverse group of organizations attending the webinar, and I think you'll find that the different approaches to IT planning and budgeting that we're going to discuss today are really applicable for organizations of many different sizes. And some of the specifics are going to vary, of course, depending on the size of your organization. But the overall concept and approach, the strategy, if you will, is pretty consistent. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. So I want to start with this planning framework as sort of an organizing principle for IT planning. And as I go through it, you may think, well, yeah, this is obvious. It's nothing earth-shattering here. And that's kind of the point behind it, actually. It's really meant to be a way for you to think about IT in your organization. IT is, by its very nature, a complex entity. And it can be hard to sort of get a handle on technology at times because of the complexity. And so it's really important to have a simple framework like this. And there are other frameworks that you can use. This is one that we've been using for several years now and have found very effective. One of the nice things about a framework, and especially an easy to understand framework, is that it also provides a way for you to explain IT issues to other decision makers and stakeholders in the organization. And it really is important to get that sort of understanding on the part of key decision makers, because if IT remains a black box, they're not really going to be in a position where they can make good decisions. So just quickly going up through the framework, and we're going to go into more detail on each of these sections. At the foundation of any IT within an organization is good IT governance, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more over the next few slides. But IT governance is just a critical part of IT working effectively, and if you don't have some fundamental structures and policies and so forth around governance in place, then your IT is most likely going to struggle. So governance is critical. And then once you get into the actual technology, establishing reliable network connectivity is very important. So that's the first step. Once you've done that, then you need to make sure that you have physical devices, whether they're workstations, tablets, smartphones, whatever the case may be. You have physical devices that are functional and are not going to be causing a lot of problems for the staff that are trying to use them. You want to make sure that your data is backed up. And this sounds kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised the number of places where reliable data backup is not always in place, or is not functioning as well as it should be. And then finally are the actual information systems themselves. And in some ways, this is what all of the other levels of the planning framework are working towards, is providing a reliable infrastructure that your information systems can run on. And the information systems are, those are the systems like email, your file server, your accounting system, your CRM, your fundraising package. That's where your information is stored, and that's really the part of IT that's most valuable to an organization. But if you don't have the other elements of this planning framework in place, your information, which is a very valuable asset, is going to be on shaky ground. And so as you think about where to invest your IT dollar, I would encourage you to use this kind of planning framework as a way of prioritizing initiatives. And we'll get into some examples and more specifics throughout the rest of this presentation. So let's start with governance. What do I mean by governance? Governance, if you've sat in on any of the planning webinars or sessions that I've done before, you probably have seen these slides, but they always are worth repeating. And I think governance is one of those things that people don't think about very much, or they worry that it's something that's going to add a ton of complexity or process and paperwork and bureaucracy to their organization. But you can really boil down the essential ingredients of good IT governance into some simple concepts that can be applied at a variety of different levels, whether they're small organizations, medium-sized, or large organizations. So let's start with a poll here. Curious who manages IT at your organization? Do you have a chief information officer? Do you have an IT director? Is it IT support staff? Somebody else? Does nobody manage IT at your organization? That's certainly a possible answer. All right, great. Great. So we kind of have here sort of the almost a number for number sort of inverse of the size of the organization, and I don't want to assume that the numbers correspond to size, but about 10% of the attendees today have a CIO. I'm assuming those are probably for the larger organizations. 25% have an IT director, which is likely for the mid-sized organizations, and then 15% have IT support staff that manage IT, and then 50% have others, so it's probably someone else in the organization who has responsibility for IT. So the chances are, and this kind of highlights one of the points that I'd like to make, which is it can be a different person who's, let me see if I can, there we go. So there you see the results. Apologies for not sharing that earlier. So it can be a different person, and the person who's probably the most appropriate to manage IT at the organization is going to depend on a lot of factors, including organizational size. So these are some of the essentials. These are the three essential ingredients that are needed for IT to be effective and for IT governance to be in place. So 1, leadership, 2, organizational structures, and 3, processes. And by leadership, I mean that the leadership of the organization is engaged at some level in IT, is committed to the success of IT, and is interested, not necessarily expert in technology, but is interested in how technology can help and positively affect the organization. And that leadership is at some level providing oversight. I think one of the ingredients for problems in an organization is when the IT department sort of becomes siloed from the rest of the organization, and particularly the leadership. Because when that happens, IT just becomes disengaged from what the organization is trying to accomplish, and it tends to lead to misinvestment, overinvestment, underinvestment. You end up oftentimes with a system that isn't really suitable to what the organization is trying to accomplish. So leadership is very important. You need to have the right organizational structure, and as we saw in our poll, this can really vary based on the size and other factors unique to an organization. So larger organizations probably need an IT director, a dedicated IT director, or CIO, whereas smaller organizations can afford necessarily to have someone in that role full time, but there still needs to be someone within the organization who's sort of charged with being responsible for technology. And I'd like to take this, this slide as an opportunity to sort of emphasize what I see as a real change right now in the world of IT, which is a shift from the IT director who is kind of focused on control to an IT director that's more focused on collaboration. So I think as we move, the next 5 years are going to bring some pretty significant changes in the world of technology, and it's going to be important for organizations to have someone who owns IT, who's interested in making technology work for the rest of the organization, which really requires kind of a collaborative approach. Ideally, the person who owns IT, whether it's the IT director, the CIO, could be the CFO, the VP of Finance, office manager. As much as possible, they need to be able to translate the IT goals into business goals. And another way of saying that is they need to be interested in the program. What is the organization trying to accomplish? What's its mission? How can technology help affect that mission? And it's really up to the person who owns IT to make that connection. And they can, solicit input and feedback from other members of the staff. They can, conduct surveys. They can get out there and observe how technology is being used. But at the end of the day, it's on their shoulders to sort of make that connection. And then finally, whoever it is, the IT director, CIO, whoever is responsible for technology, needs to be empowered by the executives to do the work that they need to do in order to make technology effective. And then finally, the third sort of element of effective governance is processes, and processes that encourage accountability. So for example, you can have one of the best ways to encourage accountability is to have regular reporting and check-ins. That can take on many different forms. I think, usually when you think about process, you think about a Visio diagram with, a lot of steps and control points, and that may be necessary for larger, more complex organizations. But for smaller organizations, the process could be as simple as a weekly or monthly meeting between, the leadership or a key leader on the executive team and the person who's responsible for technology. So it doesn't need to be overly complex. It really needs to be appropriate for the nature of the organization, but it does need to be in place. And IT needs to be involved in the planning process as well. So before we move on to the next section, which is going to be to talk about assessment, I was wondering if you had anything you wanted to add, Norwin?
No, not yet.
You good? Okay. And we had one question, excellent question. If I could explain a little bit more what I mean by the control paradigm. So what's meant by the control paradigm is kind of locking down the information. So sort of an extreme example would be, I'm going to actually, calling it extreme is probably a bit unfair, but let's say you've got a Wi-Fi network at your office. Are you going to allow people to connect to that Wi-Fi network with personal devices, or are you only going to allow it for devices that are owned and managed by the organization? So that's a control issue. And the answer is going to be different for different organizations. So if you have a lot of sensitive data on your network, if there's different compliance regulations that you have to adhere to, it may be a very important policy to prevent individuals from connecting to the corporate network from their personal devices. But if that's not the case, if the sensitive information, if there's no way to access it through the corporate Wi-Fi network, and it makes life more difficult for everyone trying to do their job just to put that regulation in place, then maybe it's not necessary. So there needs to be. So I think traditionally, IT directors have often put themselves in a control role where they're really locking down the network and locking down access to it, which is not a bad thing. But I think it runs the risk of creating sort of a siloed environment and having sort of a bunker mentality on the part of the IT department where, IT is this, service is sort of handed out sparingly as opposed to something that is sort of encouraged for helping the organization accomplish its job. So if the elements of IT governance are in place, if they're not in place, and you're beginning an IT planning process, try to find a way to address those issues. It's not always easy, and there are different, challenges in any organization. Political challenges with the organizational culture. It might not be possible, but I think the budget and planning process is a good opportunity to try to move some of those things forward. So if there's no accountability, there's no regular check-ins, and you're starting to work on a planning process, then maybe it's a good time to say, okay, here's my proposed budget for the next fiscal year. Let's set up a meeting schedule so that we can meet on a monthly basis to just talk about how we're doing with the various initiatives. I can report back on what we've accomplished and how much money we've spent. So there's even small things like that can have a huge impact on the success of IT. So the budgeting and planning time is a good time to kind of look at those different issues. As you're thinking about what to invest in, what to plan for the future, you want to take an assessment of the current state of your network. And want to do another poll here. If your organization has done an IT assessment recently. All right, great. So it's just about 50-50. Slightly more folks have done an assessment recently, and some have not. And if we have time at the end, I'd love to hear comments or feedback from anyone who would like to kind of weigh in on what their experience of that was like. I think one of the themes here is finding ways to break down sort of the complexity or mysteriousness of IT into a form that can be easily understood. I think that's a critical part of the planning and budgeting process. And so this is a model, I guess, that we've used at different times that's pretty effective. And it's a way of mapping business processes to what we could call the technology stack. So for example, and business process might be a bit of a misnomer here. I mean, the business process is communication, right? The application that, or the solution, I guess, that sort of facilitates that business process is email. The application that email runs on, for some organizations, it might be Exchange, Microsoft Exchange Server. For other organizations, it could be Google Apps or Office 365's Exchange. So you put the application at that layer of the stack, then you go one layer down and you talk about what platform it's running on. Well, it's running on this server, and that's running on a virtual host. The business process is, collaboration or proposal writing is a business process. We use file sharing to accomplish that. That's the solution. We use, the Windows file sharing system or Box or Ignite or Google Drive. That runs on this platform. The business process is reaching out to constituents. We have a CRM that facilitates that, and we use Salesforce. The CRM runs on Salesforce. So, you can make this as exhaustive and detailed as you want. I think you want to try to capture the major business processes that are vital for your organization, and identify the different solutions that are fulfilling those business processes. And I think it's important to look at the business process, because sometimes if you just look at the solution layer, the business process can get abstracted out of that. For example, you may have, your organization may have 50 constituents, like just 50 folks that you need to stay in touch with, and that's it. And your organization may use a spreadsheet to track those 50 constituents, and that may be enough. And so if you leave out the business process of constituent tracking and just focus on the solution, in this case the spreadsheet, you might lose the fact that, hey, that's a critical business process. Is a spreadsheet really the best way for us to be capturing that information? Or as part of our planning for next year, should we think about or look into the possibility of finding another solution for capturing that information? So this is really kind of a top-down approach for looking at and mapping out your business processes and then seeing sort of where they fall on your technology platform. Okay, got a few questions here. Great. What do you? We'll come back to the questions in a minute. So this is so going from the top-down approach of this enterprise architecture to more of going back to the bottom-up approach of the planning framework. This is a very simple tool that can be very effective. So if you remember back to the planning framework, the first layer above governance is connectivity. You want to look at separately. You want to look at your internet connectivity and your local area network, and you want to just say, is our internet, is it meeting our needs as an organization? I think the requirement for fast internet continues to grow, and the price of fast internet continues to drop. And I think it's easy for organizations to kind of fall behind the curve on that. To have purchased an internet connection 3 or 4 years ago, it was maybe meeting their needs 3 or 4 years ago, but it is no longer, the internet suddenly seems slower and slower and slower, when the reality is people are using all kinds of online applications that require a lot of bandwidth, and there are new technologies for delivering bandwidth in a more affordable way. So that's worth looking at. And you also want to look at your local area network, and that's really two things. One, it's your physical network, so those Ethernet cables, the switches that they plug into in the back office, and your Wi-Fi network. And you want to make sure that those are meeting your needs, because if they're not, nothing else you do really is going to matter. You could have the most expensive SharePoint or Salesforce implementation in the world. You could have, high-end equipment, but if it can't connect to the network, to the server locally or to the internet, none of that other stuff really matters. So it's really important that. And the other thing is internet connectivity. It's a once every 5-year investment, really. And once you've established it, it should be pretty rock solid and never be a problem again. So it's really worth making the investment in early on. We've had organizations who've moved into new buildings and have tried to use the cabling that was already there. And sometimes that works. You want to make sure that that's going to work ahead of time. But oftentimes it just creates all kinds of problems. And it's one of those things where it can be expensive to deploy new cabling, but once you do it, it's done forever pretty much when it comes to Ethernet cabling, and then you're in good shape moving forward. Once you've looked at the internet connectivity, you want to look at your devices and just decide, like, what's the state of our front office devices. So that's primarily workstations and laptops. Are they under warranty still? How old are they? Our general rule of thumb is that workstations get replaced every 4 to 5 years, laptops every 3 years, and that you always want your equipment to be under warranty. And then you want to also look at the back office. This is becoming, less and less important as more and more organizations move out to the cloud. But chances are most organizations still have a server or two, if not more, for larger organizations. You want to make sure that that equipment is also under warranty. And for servers, we typically recommend a 5-year replacement cycle. You want to look at backups, and there's really two different things that you want to look at when it comes to backups. One, what's its capacity to help you recover from a disaster? So backing up your data is fine. How long is it going to take to restore the data when you need that? How long will it take to rebuild your server if it goes down or if it suffers some sort of hardware failure? What are your options for accessing the data or critical parts of your data while the disaster recovery process is going on? Where will the data be restored to? So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about your backups, you're also you're not just making sure that the data is backed up somewhere, but what's the plan for recovering that data if you ever need it? And then secondly, you want to look at your retention. How long do you need to be able to keep data for? How frequently do you need to be able to go back and get that data? I think, with the move to the cloud, a lot of offerings like Office 365 have a 1-month retention. And we've found increasingly that a lot of organizations are okay with that. They basically say, you know what, and what I mean by that is not that you can only, actually with Office 365, you can only, if you lose your mailbox with all of your email in it, they can restore all of the email. So if you have an email from 3 years ago that has critical information in it, that's getting backed up every night. And if your mailbox gets wiped out for whatever reason, that email will get restored along with all your other emails. However, if you accidentally delete that email and don't realize it for 3 months, that's when retention becomes important. You can't go back to a backup from 3 months ago and recover that data, because once you deleted that email, the new backups that were being made overrode it. So retention is really a question of, how far, what's sort of the oops factor? Oh, I deleted that 3 months ago. Can I go back and restore it now? And what we've found increasingly is that most organizations are okay with 3-month retention. We even have clients, pretty large groups that we work with, that are okay with 1-month retention. The theory being, if it's really important, we have it somewhere else, like on paper. And if you don't remember it for a month, it probably wasn't that important, and we can live without it. That's going to vary dramatically from organization to organization, though. So it's really, and with all of these assessments, whether or not it's stable, requires attention, or is critical, really kind of depends on the specific needs of your organization. And then finally, the information systems. Are they meeting your needs, and is the platform that they're on stable? And you want to look at availability in all of this as well. And I think that's one of the key factors driving people to cloud-based email, is that the availability is much better than what you can achieve on-premise. Microsoft has, I think, 99.99, it might be 998% uptime with their Office 365 service. That's much greater than what you can guarantee with a single on-premise server in an office. And so that's another thing to look at when you're doing this assessment. It's not just a question of, is it old and out of date? Does it need to be replaced? That's important to look at. But you also want to look at whether or not it's currently meeting the needs of the organization. So once you've done the assessment, it's time to come up with an action plan. And what I would do is, so all of these different elements of the assessment can all stack together. So you just have one page with these different assessment evaluation all together. You can take a look at it, and from there see, well, what are the things I need to focus on the most? The great thing about coming with an action plan is, again, it's easy to communicate. You put it in a graphical format like this, present it to key decision makers in your organization, and if you've laid the groundwork, they'll get it right away. If you've gone through and sort of established, the assessment piece, then you can kind of lead them to the action plan based on prioritizing the action items that come out of that assessment. So, we need to establish a reporting structure. Once we do that, this is all hypothetical. We've got a couple D-Link wireless access points that don't cover the full range of our office. When we're having a meeting, people can't connect to the network. We need to improve that. Our email's on an old Exchange server, and it's gone down a few times in the last year. We really need to migrate out to some kind of hosted solution. That's a pretty critical need. And then, you know, towards the end of the year, a couple of our laptops are going to be 4 years old, and we need to replace those. So kind of, you know, boiling down sort of the critical items into this kind of a framework is important. So I'd like to now, now that you've heard all of my sort of general principles, I think what's really helpful is seeing how these things come into play in the real world. And I'd like to hand this over to Norwin for a little bit. He can tell us a little bit more about his experience with IT budget and planning at La Clinica. Oh, Norwin got muted. I'm going to unmute him. Whoops, somebody else did. Okay. All right, are you there, Norwin?
Yes, I am here.
All right.
Some music. Okay. No, I just wanted to get your attention. We're ready. La Clínica, let me explain you a little bit what is La Clínica del Pueblo. We are, our mission is to build a healthy community, Latino community through culturally appropriate health services, focuses on those that need it the most. La Clínica del Pueblo has been working for over 30 years. Originally was created to help Central American people who was migrating to the United States for the war. Right now, La Clínica del Pueblo is more a broad community health clinic that take care of everyone. I would say that really needs the service. I was trying to take notes of what Johan was saying. And basically, I started in May 2012 at La Clínica, and we are like, we walk through every single step that Johan was talking about in this past 30 minutes, and I would say that this is a really nice experience, and it's really good to have a partner that work with us. In this case, I would say the Community IT Innovators. They are really a good help in this process. Let's go to the next slide. And I don't have too many slides, but I have more talking. I just want to try to say how we at La Clínica del Pueblo conceive budget and planning. Something very basic that we have is we know the budget is an estimate of money that we need to spend for a set period of time. And also that we have to think how to organize these activities and how to organize this money, let's say, and achieve a desired goal. What is the goal? To have our institution running and to have everything that they need when they need it. Because sometimes it looks like we are not working. Some people might say, okay, if I don't create a ticket, you're not working. And that is not true, because there's a lot of things that we're doing in the back and trying to cover up, like something that Johan mentioned was the backup. You know, the backup is a really essential piece in your organization, and maybe you don't use it for 364 days. That there is one day in the year that you are going to need it, and that it is our work. I mean, our work is to be there in the moment that when the customers need it. So I would say that the planning and the budgeting at La Clínica del Pueblo has been a really easy task, because we are working in partnership with Community IT, and they help us a lot. So let's move to the next slide. This is basically an overview of what Johan was trying to explain to us, and I will mention the network audit is important. When you are planning, you have to create a prioritized list, wish list. This means that you have to do like a dream list. Whatever you want, put it in the list. It doesn't matter. The beginning of creating your budget is you have to think for those that are your colleagues and they are not thinking about technology. Usually they think about technology at the moment when they need it, but our job is, I mean, as a IT director, CIO, or people who work with technology, is we have to think about what are they going to ask, and what I can say, add a little bit more. Always add a little bit more because they are going. The financial people will say, we can't give you that. We can't give you everything because they might not see it that you need it. But it's important that you have it. So you have to be ready in this case. And after that, pues consider how much it is allowed for you to use and execute your budget. That is something that I can say. We at La Clinica, we use every single dime that they provide us because if you don't spend it next year, they are not going to give you more. And if you pass the budget that you have, they're gonna say that you are not managing well the budget allowed. So this is something very, very important that we at La Clinica probably take seriously, and that's how we handle our budget and money and our budget, I would say. Um, let's talk about an example of how all these pieces together in one scenario. We can go to the next slide and you can see that in 2012, for example, we have a budget for 15 workstations. We calculate for $1,000, so we have $15,000, and we have a PC recycling and data removal. We have $1,200, and then workstation upgrade labor $15,000. This was the budget. And what we really did is we tried to work around a little bit, and we found a good provider, I will say, of technology or hardware. We are working with Gov Connection. Someone recommended Gov Connection, and we created an account with them. And these people have been really, really good in providing us with hardware and a really good price. Better price, I would say, that the company that was selling it to us. For example, I tried to buy some Dell computers, and Dell computers, the same computers that I bought from Gov Connection, were more expensive with Dell than with Gov Connection. Gov Connection uh, sold the same computers. So for some reason they got better prices and they gave me a better deal. So I was able to buy 22 computers instead of 15, and I used $14,630. And then for the PC recycling and data removal, and this, what we did is we format all computers, hard drives, and everything, and we create a staff giveaway program. So those computers were old, but not too old for those people who want to have it at home and navigate the internet and play around. They can have the computer. So we give it away to the staff, and that's how we save $1,200. And the workstation upgrade labor, in this case, Gov Connection I think they have a really big. I think they are a really big company, and they have a warehouse where they were able to set an image for one computer that I have here, and they did it for a reasonable price. For some reason, I don't know how much they charge, like $20, $30 maybe extra for deploying the image in every single computer. So when I got the computer, I got the computer with the image. So we only have to change a little bit some configurations, and the computer will ready to work. So in this case, that's how we plan. I have $16,000, not extra, but I will say to move in a different project that we needed. Okay, because this is when my wish list was useful, because they cut 2 or 3 programs in the budget that I proposed. So when I save this money, I say, okay, I saved this money. Now we can move ahead and use the one that you put down at the beginning. So I would say that this was I tried to share a little bit of an example of what we did at La Clinica del Pueblo, and where the budgeting, you had to be creative. You had to try to accommodate to the needs that the customers ask you for, but you have to be careful. They're gonna ask you always for the best technology. Sometimes the best technology the people is asking, it is not the right for them. Okay, so we have to be really careful with that. And that's basically what I have. I think, Johan, do you have something else? No.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example. I'm gonna mute your mic, Norwin. You got it? Okay. Hold on. I'll get you. There we go. So I think is that you? So I think one of the things that I like about this example also is that what you don't see here is kind of the larger picture of La Clinica's budget, which was investing quite a bit in some network connectivity initiatives. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, the primary care physicians, the practitioners, the doctors who meet with patients, they have these tablet computers that they use because they're using an electronic medical record system. And so they're going around the different waiting rooms, checking in with patients, and entering information directly into the computer. And this was when we kind of first started on this budgeting and planning process with the Clinica 4 or 5 years ago. This was a huge problem because they had, a small Wi-Fi router that just couldn't handle sort of the need for connectivity of all of the different doctors and their laptops. And so, there was a significant investment made early on in putting in place a nice Wi-Fi router system using equipment that was purchased through TechSoup's Cisco donation program. So it's still, cheaper than it would have been if they had just purchased it directly from CDW. But it was another example of where the Clinica was, understood that really in order to improve or even, allow for the doctors to be able to do their work, they needed to improve the network in that area. And so, the budget itself, if you were to see like the entire budget instead of just this one little section, included, pretty significant investments in other areas of their infrastructure in sort of a prioritized way. And because of the ability to save money and be resourceful at different levels of the budget, it allowed for them to accomplish more of their priorities. So put in a wireless network, but use Cisco's donated equipment, that freed up a little bit more money for working on the workstation, initiative. And then because of Norwin's resourcefulness in finding a way to basically accomplish the same goal at half the price, then they were able to free that money up to invest in some changes. I think there was money freed up in the budget that went towards in purchasing. They were able to purchase more workstations than they otherwise would have been able to do. So I think one of the lessons learned that I've taken from this, and I think one of the things that I think La Clinica has done really well over the years, is stay focused on the priorities. And so they haven't just said, well, we can't afford that, so it just needs to be taken out of the budget. They've left it in the budget and said, well, we understand this is a priority, and we may not have the funding to completely do this in fiscal year 2012, but let's leave it in the budget. And then if the money is made available, we already have that prioritized list of what we need to invest in. And so, they're basically able to come up with a great plan and then invest in that plan as funds became available. And so I think that approach has been very effective there, because it doesn't mean that they have, brand new latest and greatest equipment all the time throughout the entire organization. But what they do have is a network that functions and functions effectively for the work that they need to do. And I think a big part of that is because of the commitment on the part of the leadership of La Clinica to basically, say, give us the plan, and we'll put a good faith effort into trying to adopt and, enact that plan. And as Norwin said, I think he raised a number of excellent points in his presentation. Things happen. You're not always able to work according to your plan or budget. But if you have a plan in place, then you know where you're deviating from it. And you can understand and communicate to staff and other stakeholders like the board, well, this was the plan. Here's why we didn't go with the plan. Here's why we had to go in this direction instead. So that essentially concludes the main portion of our webinar. And we wanted to leave a little bit of time here at the end for any questions that anyone had. So you can use the question functionality and go to webinar to ask your questions. If anybody has any, and if not, we'll just end the webinar early. We have a few questions. Great question. So we have, what are some KPIs you'd recommend organizations look at when going through the assessment and planning? So what are some key performance indicators that are helpful to look at when doing assessment and planning? I think I'm stumbling a little bit on that question because it varies from organization to organization. I mean, I think there are some generic network performance indicators that you can look at, such as uptime. How many service interruptions did you have during the course of the year? Your IT department should be able to provide you with some sort of metrics around service level. So how many tickets? One of the things that we look at La Clinica actually is number of tickets submitted, who's submitting those tickets, and then how quickly the tickets are being resolved. So those kind of give you some idea of what sort of ongoing service delivery is like. Other metrics that might be useful probably get more into where the information system lines up with the with what the organization is trying to accomplish, and those metrics would need to be a little bit more sort of specific and unique to the organization itself. And someone's raising their hand. Oh. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we will. Hold on. I keep getting ahead of myself in this webinar today. Oh wait, I think I just saw a question pop up. What are general guidelines for capitalizing IT project development costs? That one might be a little bit beyond my level of expertise. In terms of, that question has a little bit more sort of financial knowledge or accounting knowledge than I have. But actually what I would like to do, instead of completely punting on that one, is let you all know that we're going to have a very special guest webinar presenter early in 2014, Donnie Shimamoto, who's in February, who's a CPA and speaks regularly on sort of the world of IT planning as it intersects with financial management. So that's going to be a special 1.5-hour webinar in February, and I think he would be he'd easily be able to answer that question. And that's actually a webinar where we're going to get into a lot more sort of nitty-gritty of the financial management aspects of IT planning. So I'll leave that one for him to ask. And then the last question is, what about some upcoming webinars? So let me go ahead and get into that. So the next webinar we have is going to be on November 14th, so that's just about 3 weeks away. And that's going to be sort of almost like a panel topical conversation between myself and our Chief Technology Officer, Matt Eshelman. And we're just going to look back at 2013 and talk about some different trends that we've seen in the world of nonprofit technology. So it's going to be kind of a wide-ranging discussion. We're going to talk about everything from new software platforms to things that we've seen our clients and other nonprofits starting to do or do more seriously in 2013. Talk about some different solutions for project management, maybe talk about social media a little bit. It's just going to be a great conversation that I'm really looking forward to. Then, as I mentioned earlier, in February, we're going to have Donnie Shimamoto present for us. That'll be a free presentation. Anybody can join. He speaks a lot at N10. He speaks at a variety of accounting conferences. It's going to be a fantastic presentation. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be in February. Feel free to connect with Community IT and I think with Nonprofit Roundtable as well. I think their Twitter handle is NonprofitRT. Ours is Community IT. We're also on Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're going to send you a short survey after you exit the webinar, and we would love to get your feedback. This is something we've been doing for almost 2 years now, and have really enjoyed doing. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback and constructive feedback from folks who've joined us for these webinars, and that really helps us to improve them. So if you have a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, or a presenter that you think would be someone who would be really interesting to hear from, please let us know, and we'd be happy to kind of set that up. Finally, if you missed anything today, we're going to have a link to the slides, and the recording is going to be mailed out as well. All right. Sounds good. And yes, the last question was, are the webinars going to be at the same time? Yes. Our webinars are basically generally the Thursday at 12:30. Whether it's the second, third, or fourth Thursday kind of depends on what else is going on that month. But they'll always be on Thursdays at 12:30. And if for whatever reason you can't make that time, they'll be recorded. So go ahead and sign up for the webinar anyways, and then we'll be sure to get the recording out to you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And, oh, do you want to say anything about this, Roshni? Okay. If you'd like a free consultation, please email Roshni, R.Katari at communityit.com, and we'd be happy to provide you with that. All right. So that's the end of the webinar. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us here today. We had a great time, and especially want to thank Norwin for his time today. Really, I learned something new, even though we talk a lot. I've learned something new from him today, and I know the audience did as well. Finally, last but not least, we want to thank Malcolm and everyone over at Nonprofit Roundtable for co-hosting this webinar with us. Please be sure to check on their website. They have a lot of excellent activities. They're a tremendous resource for nonprofits in this area and around the country. And so if you haven't checked them out yet, you definitely should. All right, and on that note, we will be ending the presentation. Thank you all, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.